Hello everyone, how's it going? And welcome to my Wild Rift tier list for patch 5.2c. I haven't done one of these tier lists for quite some time, but we did get a brand new update today, and we have had a couple of updates where I haven't been updating my tier list in terms of videos. It's been updated on my website, but I haven't been giving you all that video content. I was away for 2 weeks. I didn't play the game for that much during that 2 weeks, but I've been playing a lot over the past week or so, and I've got you all an updated tier list to show you all what champions are strong and what champions are maybe not as strong, and some of them are probably warranted for maybe some more buffs. We'll have to wait and see. In terms of the Baron lane, not really too much has changed in the Baron lane. Not really a few, not really a lot of buffs, not really a lot of nerfs have come in. There are some champions that have got buffed and have got nerfed, which I will go through over the last few patches. But in the S+ tier, we still have the same champions still up there. The likes of RENGAR, still very, very strong with pressy attack. Very strong and aggressive Baron lane champion to play. Darius, with the buff he received all the way at the start of patch 5.2, has definitely allowed him to stabilize in the Baron lane and also makes him a lot stronger. Same with Riven as well. Again, got the same treatment as Darius as well. It's getting strong right after the buffs that they received. Jax has always been really strong and always will be really strong up in the Baron lane, especially with the likes of Riftmaker still being really good. There's even an AP build going around with Psychic Protector. That one is kind of cooking, but it's still really good. I mean, depending on what build you go, it's completely fine. Like, either way, Jax is still very strong. Maokai, by far the best, probably Baron laner and best tank in the Baron lane as well. Super sustainable, does a lot of damage. Maokai is kind of like the Cassante of Wild Rift. Like, you do so much damage. You're a tank, you have CC, you have everything that you need. And also Aatrox is up there as well, thanks to some of the buffs to some of the items like Eclipse, Sundered Sky, both helping out quite a lot. Into the S tier, Garen, super easy champion to play, really, really nice in terms of a tank and also just being able to do a lot of damage as well. You do have the execute with his ultimate. Set is still a very strong champion with the likes of the Heartsteel Titanic Hydra combo, even though Titanic Hydra did get a little bit of a nerf. Set is still in a fine position. Same with Urgot as well. Urgot did receive a little bit of a nerf. I don't think it's going to affect him too much, even though the nerf numbers does seem quite big. We'll have to wait and see how he kind of performs after these nerfs, but I still think he's going to be sitting in the S tier. Some more tanks, Shen and Volibear, still very strong tanks as well. The same with Ornn. All these three tanks just serve different purposes. Shen really strong at split pushing, really strong at pushing in a side lane. Volibear has insane 1v1 potential in terms of dueling and also just in terms of tankiness as well. Ornn, great for team fighting, great for setup potential in team fights. Akali and Jace maybe not as strong in the Baron lane as what they are in the mid lane, but still two very strong champions that you can carry quite well with in the Baron lane. Gwen's still very powerful as well as an AP champion. Camille did receive a buff a couple of patches ago. I mean, she did move up my tier list since the last video that I did. She used to be an A and now she's an S. I think she's in a pretty decent spot. Mordekaiser, the new champion. I didn't do a tier list when Mordekaiser got released. It's now been a couple of weeks now since Mordekaiser's been released. I don't think he's completely broken. I think he's a strong champion, very strong champion. If you do get head in lane, if you can land your ultimate on, say, like any sort of AD carry or any sort of carry on the enemy team, you can 1v1 them as well. You're going to be getting a lot of extra bonuses in terms of stats and also being a huge carry for your team. I've been seeing a few weaknesses with Mordekaiser though. It's kind of difficult at times to kind of shut people down, especially because stasis is such a huge enchant in this game. For 1,000 gold, you kind of delay the possibility of Mordekaiser using his ultimate and being able to take your stats and deal damage to you. And also his abilities are kind of slow as well, so they can be dodged pretty easily. Yasuo Baron lane, still very strong. Again, maybe not as good as mid lane Yasuo in terms of a tank, but still very strong to play. Into the A tier, these champions are still relatively strong and still pretty decent. Kennen, still a long-range champion that can still perform very well. Teemo as well, just more of an annoying champion than anything else. Still can perform really well in the Baron lane. You've got Vladimir as the AP champion, a scaling AP champion that can perform really well. Sion as a tank in the Baron lane, maybe not as strong as the other tanks. The likes of Sion, Malphite, Gragas, and Dr. Mundo. All these tanks are not as strong, but they can still perform pretty well. You got a lot of crowd control with the likes of Sion, Malphite, and Gragas. And Dr. Mundo is mainly normally good just against AP champions just because of his healing and how his kit works. Irelia, Fiora, maybe not as strong in terms of duelists. We're at a state of the game now where grouping is very important, and both these duelists kind of want to stay in the side lane and also trying to kind of want to win duels, but at the same time it's very difficult for them to win duels. Also, just in terms of damages and items at the moment, they're both in a pretty rough spot. Yone is still okay in the Baron lane, even though he did get nerfed quite a few patches ago now. He's still okay. He won't perform as well as what he did before. That's why he's not in S tier anymore, but he's still a pretty good champion. Tryndamere, Olaf, Pantheon, Wukong, Nasus. I do know Wukong got a buff in today's patch. However, I don't think he's still in a strong spot to be a good Baron lane champion. I think he's a lot better as a jungler. Nasus just takes way too long to come online, and the other champions just don't really offer too much in the Baron lane, and you're just pretty weak overall. Kale's still pretty weak as well. We're still waiting for Kale's rework. I'm pretty excited to try out Kale once her rework comes in. And then you have Singed as well, which, to be honest, Singed is just not a champion at all. I don't think I've seen a single person play Singed in the whole of season 14. And to be honest, I haven't played that many games, but I played like a good few hundred games. Well, 100 games. And I still haven't seen a single Singed. So, hey, take that as you wish, but I just don't think Singed is very strong. Into the jungle, few champions that I've moved down, few champions that I moved up. S plus tier, still quite a lot of very strong champions. Lee Sin, I think is a lot harder now to kind of pull off with some of the other champions in the meta, like Lilia, like Viego, like Xin Zhao. Lee Sin does struggle against some of these champions, but I think his playmaker potential still puts him up there in the S plus tier for me. Xin Zhao, whether you play Conqueror, whether you play Phase Rush, this champion does a lot of burst damage and also is just super annoying to deal with. Lilia, again, a very strong jungler that has multiple keystones that you can run with her, depending on the situation of the game and who you're up against. Viego did receive a nerf. It is a more of a crit nerf than anything else. I do think that Viego, if you build on hit with Blade Rune King and Trinity Force, I still think he will be very strong, and I don't think that he's going to be in a position where he's going to be losing a lot of win rate. I do know the crit version of Viego is a lot stronger, but I think overall it's just not really that strong, in my opinion. I always preferred the on-hit version, and now the on-hit version is going to probably be better than the crit version. I still think Viego is going to be S plus tier. Moving to S tier, Vi actually received a pretty big buff. I was actually tempted to move her up into S plus tier. I believe it was like 2 patches ago now. Vi received a pretty big buff where she got a bunch of damage and also cooldown reduction. Really easy champion to play. Very, very nice to play as well. Gragas with his burst damage, I think it's going to be very powerful and is still very powerful. Yone jungle, you don't have to worry too much about the laning phase with Yone. You can scale up, you can buy crit items and be really powerful. Amumu and Ramos, both super easy champions to play, super easy champions to master as well, and they're just really easy tanks to play that you can just farm up, tank up a lot of damage, and be an asset for your team. Riven, more of a carry with her mobility, still going to be very strong. Evelyn, not as good as what she was before. She did receive a nerf a few patches ago. She does still have that invisibility, which makes her very strong, which is why she's in the S tier, but she's not as strong as what she was before. Aatrox as a jungler, still very good. Maokai as well as a tank. If you want to play tanks in the jungle, again, Maokai is still up there as one of the best. Talon, even though he's received a very big nerf, I think this is more to do with the kit of Talon. He's been nerfed, I think, 3 or 4 times now in the past few months, and he's still a very strong jungler to play, just because of his mobility with his third ability. You've got the invisibility with his ultimate as well, and his burst damage is still up there as one of the best. Kha'Zix with his burst damage as well, also still very powerful. Hecarim's kind of fallen off a little bit. He's still okay. He's still pretty strong. He's just not like S plus tier worthy anymore. He's still pretty decent though. Kayn, I think his shadow form was good, and I think his darkened form was a bit weak. Now they've actually buffed his darkened form. I think they're both kind of on the same level now, where whatever version of the build that you go, obviously depends on the situation of the game, right? If you're against a lot of ranged champions, a lot of squishy champions, you go Shadow Assassin. If you're against a lot of melee champions, a lot of tanks, you can go Darkened Form. But I think the Darkened Form buffs has definitely pushed up Kayn, and he's going to be in a very, very strong spot. Moving down on into the A tier, quite a lot of champions in the A tier. Again, it's a tier that's kind of like okay tier. Champions are not that bad, but not as good at the same time. Pantheon still has a lot of burst potential and still could do a lot with his ultimate, especially with ganks and setting up plays around objectives. Nautilus, AP Nautilus, did receive a bit of a nerf a few patches ago, but it's still very powerful. You can still burst and do a lot of damage. Morgana still has a very strong jungle clear, but just, in my opinion, Morgana's most of the time just kind of sit AFK unless you flash in and try and go for some crazy plays. Nunu's still pretty good as a tank. You know, you still have a great setup play with his snowballs, with his slows as well. He's great for zoning with his ultimate, which is a really strong asset for Nunu that not a lot of other champions actually have. Olaf and Wukong are pretty good as kind of these bruisers in the jungle. As I said, Wukong is a lot better in the jungle than the Baron lane. You just have a lot more setup potential with your ultimate. You can make a lot more plays. Olaf, if you're against a lot of crowd control, can be very, very powerful. Kindred as a carry is, again, still going to be very, very strong and very, very good. Echo as a burst mage, very powerful. Jarvan with his lockdown, with his damage output, still very powerful as well. Master Yi, again, very easy champion to play. If you don't know who to kind of start off in terms of what junglers should I start to play with, Master Yi is definitely up there as kind of one of the champions like, hey, that's a great starter champion that I need to try and play the jungle. And then it kind of gives you that little bit of a bearing, a little bit of a learning curve with the jungle, which then you can start to evolve to some of these more difficult champions. Diana, still very powerful as well in terms of burst mage, same with Fiddlesticks as well. Graves is pretty decent. I think with Infinity Edge, you can perform pretty well with Graves. Also with Immortal Shield Bow going down in price, I think could be a very good item for Graves in terms of crit item, just a cheap crit item that you can try and buy unless you want to go for something like Bloodthirster, which can still perform pretty well at the same time. Rengar with his rework, I think Rengar is going to be very interesting. Of course, I haven't played any games with him yet, but I do think with the numbers that we're seeing increase with him, he's going to be in a very, very strong spot. Every single one of his abilities got buffed. You can now be a lot more flexible with his combos and stacking his passive, which I think is so powerful with Rengar. I think he's going to be really powerful when it comes to the next patch. Or this patch, I should say. Darius jungle still could be okay. You just don't have as much setup potential in terms of jungle. Volibear jungle can still work. Honestly, I think Volibear top lane is actually better than jungle now, but Volibear jungle still works pretty well. And B tier is just kind of like some of the unique junglers that you can play and some of the weaker junglers. In terms of unique junglers, you got champions like Fiora, Neela, Camille, Jace, Shen. These are mainly all champions that are played in other lanes, but they can also play in jungle as well. If you're comfortable with the champion, then you can play it in multiple roles, like jungle, for example. Also, Zed is in that unique category. In terms of champions that are not in a unique category, they're just kind of weak in general. Trendamid jungle, not that strong. You don't clear through the jungle as quick anymore. Shyvana just takes way too long, in my opinion, to come online. Dr. Mundo, not as tanky. You can't get as much value with some of his items that he wants to build. And Gwen as well. Gwen, maybe I underrate a little bit. Maybe Gwen should be A tier. But Gwen, again, you clear the jungle too slowly, but if you can get a few items, then you can be very powerful. On to the mid lane, Ahri. I actually want to talk about Ahri because I think Ahri is a very easy champion to play. The buff that she received a few patches ago, her first ability got buffed. Her second ability cooldown got nerfed by like 2 seconds at every single rank. And also it got a damage buff as well. Like Ahri's got some really nice buffs recently. There's also like a crazy build that you can go with her, like empowered attacks, psychic protector, so you can focus a little bit more on your auto attacks as well. If you hit someone with a charm, you're definitely going to do a lot of damage. And as I said, I think she's a very easy to play champion. I think she is very strong in this patch. In terms of the other champions, they're all staying the same. Zoe, still with her one-shot potential, still very powerful, and you can hit champions really from a long range, which makes it extremely difficult to kind of get a hold of. Jace mid lane, still really good as well with his burst damage, and his trading potential is still very powerful. And Kassadin as well, his scaling is just like no other. No other champion can scale as well as Kassadin. Moving down onto the S tier, I might as well stay up here. S tier, Orianna with her scaling, again, going to be very powerful. Yone, you have a little bit more trading potential in the mid lane, especially against some of these weaker early game champions, like say Kassadin, Zoe. Trying to think of some other mages that might be played in mid lane. I mean, Annie, if you could dodge her stun as well, you know, it gives him Yone a bit more freedom in the mid lane to try and make some plays and try and go in for engages. Ziggs with his poke, another super easy champion to play. You just sit back, you just throw your bombs, and you just do a lot of damage, which is what makes Ziggs so good. Syndra with her setup play, same with Lissandra as well. They both kind of fit the same category in terms of champions. They both have really good setup play in terms of team fights. You can lock down an enemy champion, and you also have good escapability in terms of Lissandra and also Syndra with her knockaway. Yasuo mid lane, you can either play carry Yasuo or you can play tank Yasuo in the mid lane. Both of them work really well and both are very powerful at the moment. Corki in the mid lane, pretty underrated champion, I think. I think he's actually very powerful at the moment with some of the items that he can build. He can build the Lysis Gauge because it can be built on ranged champions, which gives him that bit of a lifeline shield, which is quite nice. Then you have Vladimir, still has pretty good, decent scaling in the mid lane, can still perform pretty well. Akali, pretty hard champion to master and a pretty hard champion to play, but once you do master her, or once you can master her, then she could be very powerful. Annie mid lane as well, very easy champion to play with her combos, and she can perform pretty well. Into the A tier, again, champions that are not as good, not as bad, but still in a pretty decent position overall. Echo burst damage, very powerful, can do quite a lot in the mid lane in terms of roaming. I think Echo is up there as one of the best in terms of roams. Twisted Fate with his ultimate is very powerful, again, when roaming and trying to land gold cards. I don't think the on-hit build is actually that great. I think you just want to go for 4 AP build with Twisted Fate and try and go for as much burst damage as possible. Zyra with her buffs, I think she's going to be quite decent in the mid lane. I think that she can do quite well in terms of using her abilities to just clear the wave, get zoning potential, get a lot of poke damage, and I think she's going to be quite nice to play. Veigar, if you can catch anyone with the cage, they pretty much just get one shot and you can do a lot of damage in terms of Veigar scaling. Fizz, again, with the roams and the assassin potential is there. Lux, super easy champion to play in mid lane. You have a wave clear, you have a burst combo if you catch someone with her first ability. Gragas, again, with his roaming and again with his catching potential, with his barrel. If you can land his barrel, if you can push enemies towards you and then body slam them, you can do a lot of burst damage. Kennen with the range advantage, I think, is very powerful and super underrated. Also with the ultimate being very powerful. Lucian, a lot of burst damage in the mid lane, a lot of burst damage that you can get a really early advantage. Like, say, for example, if you get some of these weak early game mages, like Aurelion Sol, for example, you could just pick Lucian mid and just jump in, do a lot of burst damage with press the attack and really get an advantage in the mid lane. Brand, again, Brand is a weird one. I think in terms of his burst damage, I think he's very strong in terms of his damage. However, he can get caught out quite easily because he's not a very mobile champion. Vex is okay, not bad. I mean, you can do a lot of burst damage. You can get resets of your ultimate. That's about it. Aurelion Sol, I think, struggles a little bit with scaling at the moment. You just take way too long to collect the Stardust. The nerfs that he's received, the past few times have made him really, really difficult to kind of stand out. Zed, you can do okay with Zed. You kind of need an early advantage with Zed though, because if you fall behind, then you're pretty useless. Morgana, again, another easy champion to play in the mid lane. Again, like I said in jungle, she just feels so AFK to me. I don't know. She just walks mid, puts her pull down, pushes a wave, and that's it. Like, that's all you can do. I mean, unless you're actually a player that's super proactive when pushing lane, you push a lane, then you roam around, then you do something, then you can actually be really good. Speaking of roaming, actually, I got a pretty big buff this patch, and I think he's going to be in a very decent spot, so I've put him in the A tier. B tier, again, some unique champions. Kai'Sa mid is probably not even a thing. The only reason I have Kai'Sa mid here is so I can recommend both the AD and the AP build. Seraphine mid lane, again, pretty AFK champion, more of a supportive mid lane champion with Karma. Both can do pretty well, but not as strong as other champions. Katarina just struggles. There's so much crowd control, silences in the game right now that you can't really get Katarina ball rolling in the early game, which if you can't snowball, then you're just going to get outscaled by every other mid laner. Diana, a lot better in the jungle than the mid lane. Same with Talon as well. Both these champions struggle because they're melee champions in the mid lane, and they find it hard to jump on top of enemy champions with these. Same with Irelia as well. Again, finds it very difficult and also very, very difficult champion to play. If I'm going to predict something absolutely wild, is that they're probably going to rework Irelia very soon, because Irelia is one of them champions that is so difficult to play on mobile that, yeah, I don't know what they're going to do with her. Pyke mid's pretty good. You don't have as much wave clear as what you did before, but its roaming potential is really nice. Galio mid's okay for burst damage, but that's about it. Swain mid, decent for scaling, decent for just a tank, but other than that, kind of useless. Malphite mid, Kayle mid, you just never play. I mean, the amount of times I still see Malphite mid lane is absolutely disgusting. AD carries, Lethal Tempo is going to be very interesting this patch. I'm pretty excited to play the new Lethal Tempo. I think there's quite a few champions that can build Lethal Tempo. The extra range is going to be so nice on some of these AD carries. Caitlyn, for example, I still think is going to be one of the best AD carries because of her long range, and now she gets even more range with Lethal Tempo, which is just absolutely crazy. Ezreal with his poke damage, I still think is very powerful as well. Super safe champion to play. Varus, super flexible with his build path. You can go in any sort of build path that you want to and still perform really well. Tristana, super great late game scaling ADC. Again, is going to benefit a lot from the range that you get with lethal tempo. Lucian, as I mentioned before, in the mid lane, his burst damage that he creates is very powerful. Zeri, scaling, very good, very strong champion. Severe as well, again with the scaling, very powerful. You're kind of useless during laning phase with Severe, but if you scale, you're more of a utility ADC with your ultimate, but you can also do a lot of burst damage with her abilities. Kai'Sa's been falling off a little bit. I think players are starting to struggle to find a good build path with Kai'Sa. I might try Immortal Shieldbow actually with Kai'Sa. 3,000 gold for a crit AD item to start things off with Kai'Sa actually doesn't sound that bad, so I might actually give that a go. Zyra, as I said, but as I said as well, you know, with lethal tempo, with the extra range, definitely going to benefit her. Kalista, very powerful, super mobile ADC that's super annoying to deal with and very, very powerful. Jhin received a buff like 2 patches ago that I completely, well, I did know about it because I have been keeping track of the patch notes, but I saw the Jhin buff and I was like, whoa. So I need to actually do a video on Jhin. I need to actually play Jhin because his buffs definitely seem really, really nice that he received a couple of patches ago when I was away. AT champions, Jinx, Draven, Ashe, Samira, Misfortune. Yeah, I mean, all these champions are pretty meh. I mean, Samira can get locked down really easily. Again, a very snowball champion that you need to kind of pop off on. Ashe might do pretty decently with the lethal tempo buffs. Same with Jinx as well. I think both these champions could do pretty well with the lethal tempo buffs. We'll have to wait and see. Draven, just you can't get that far ahead in lane phase and you just get outscaled by every other ADC. And Misfortune is still struggling even after the couple of buffs. Neela, again, not really an ADC, kind of struggles in ADC role and just struggles in jungle, just struggles in general. Corki, a lot better in mid lane because you're a lot safer in the mid lane where you can just farm up and stay AFK. Vayne just struggles to scale, takes way too long to come online, and then Twitch in the C tier. Just because he just doesn't really do anything, to be honest. I don't think he does anything at all. Support tier list. Lulu, I honestly think this buff to Ardent Center is very, very scary. I'm very worried about this Ardent Center buff. I'm very worried that you now give over more on hit damage, a lot more attack speed with the lethal tempo buffs as well. There might be a situation where we're going back to Enchanter meta with the likes of Lulu, maybe Janna, other supports like that. And yeah, that's very scary, honestly. I mean, imagine Lulu giving more attack speed now to a Caitlyn that has even more range. Like, how do you even touch the Caitlyn? You can't. It's impossible. Maokai support, super underrated. Probably one of the best tank supports right now. Very, very powerful. Just has a lot of trading potential and a lot of CC, a lot of lockdown, which is great. And the best carry support right now definitely is Pyke. His roaming potential and the difference you can make around the map is very, very strong. S tier, I've moved the Nautilus down because Maokai is just by far the best superior tank right now. I do think Nautilus is still a very good jungler. In terms of other tank junglers, you have the likes of Ornn, still very powerful as well. Braum, if you're against a lot of engage, Braum can be super good in terms of disengage support. Thresh support, again, very good. Leona as well can be very powerful with her lockdown. In terms of other enchanter supports, Yuumi, I mean, doesn't really use Ardent Center, but Yuumi in general, just so many nerfs to this cat that it's just kind of difficult to pull off now. I mean, she's still super annoying and she can still sit on someone like a Fed Xinjiao or a Fed Neela or a Fed Viego, anyone like that, and it can still give you more damage and can still be strong. But you're just kind of AFK during the laning phase, which might be a little bit of a downside, but still very strong support. And I still hate the cat, but I still regret to inform you that the cat is still strong. Janna still very strong as well as enchanter support. The peeling potential that she has, a rework for Janna is just so good. I love the rework for Janna. The way that she can move now in her ultimate is just so powerful. Soraka with her healings still going to be very strong as well. Again, another champion that benefits from Ardent Center, could be very good. Karma and Lux, two other aggressive supports and carry supports you can play in the support role, and they're both going to be very good. Other tank supports, Gragas and Alistar, and you can kind of put Rakan in that same category as well. Gragas, yeah, he's not really a support anymore, really, is he? Like, You could do some things with Gragas support, but like it's very difficult. Like, why go Gragas support when it's a lot easier to just point and click and play Maokai support? You know, something like that. I think it's just like a lot more difficult to kind of pull off. Same with Alistar as well. Same with Rakan. If you can pull off these champions, I think they can be perform very well. But just on a general note, there's a lot more easier and stronger supports to play out there. Other enchant support, Seraphine. I did have her in S tier, but I moved her down into A tier because of the nerf that she received this patch. The healing nerf is pretty big. I mean, you still have the shielding, which I still think is pretty big, but the healing nerf is pretty big as well. But I still think she'll be in a pretty decent position. Sona as well with Glacial Augment, still going to be very powerful as well as kind of this tank healing enchanter support. Nami as well, also pretty decent. And then you have Senna there as well, which can still perform pretty well. I think loads of people are struggling at the moment to kind of find what's the best role and what's the best build to go for Senna, which is why she's kind of struggling at the moment. And in terms of B tier supports, set support is kind of, yeah, I mean, if you make plays with Protobelt, it's pretty good. That's about it. Blitzcrank is kind of meh. Pretty okay, not bad. Swain, Zyra, Galio, Brand, Morgana. I mean, all these champions kind of speak for themselves. Most of them kind of just sit AFK and you just kind of hope that you can get one catch, one binding, one stun, one knock up, one hit. Like, I don't know. I think all these champions kind of speak for themselves, to be fair. I mean, you miss a hook, you're useless. Swain can be a pretty good frontline tank, but if they can, you can easily kind of go past Swain and you can get onto the AD carry, which makes it very difficult, I feel like, for a support to kind of pop off. I think Zyra might be kind of underrated. Again, her damage going up is pretty nice. Galio support is going to be pretty awesome. And then, I mean, pretty awesome if you land any of your crowd control. And then Brand and Morgana, again, just kind of AFK supports in the end. But that's everything. That is all the roles, all the tiers for the new patch. I'm definitely going to be trying out a lot of champions. I think the likes of Rengar is going to be super exciting to try. Obviously, Ari as well. I haven't tried since the buffs. I mean, honestly, I haven't tried buffs and nerfs for the last like few patches. So it's going to be exciting for me to kind of go back and try some of the champions that I haven't tried with some of these buffs that have been into the game. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.